My name is Rachel. It's Christmas Eve, and I'm sitting in my cozy one-bedroom apartment. There's no big family dinner, no forced small talk. Just a calm quiet that wraps around me like a warm hug. The cinnamon candle on the table fills the air with a sweet scent, and outside, the city is slowly being covered in a thin layer of snow. I look at my laptop, where an email from my brother Ethan sits in my inbox. The subject line reads, "Can we talk?" It's been 7 months since I left the family home, since I cut off all the financial support I'd been providing for so long. I stare at the email for a moment, not with anger or sadness. Those emotions faded away months ago. It's just a recognition that he doesn't want me, he wants what I used to give. I close my laptop and pour myself a cup of tea. As I sit by the window, I'm reminded of that fateful night when I stood on the doorstep of the house I'd helped pay for, a pie in my hands. The snow was gathering in my hair, and my heart was pounding so hard it drowned out the faint holiday music coming from inside. I remember ringing the doorbell again and again. Finally, the door opened, and my father, Mr. Thompson, stared at me blankly, as if I were a stranger. "Sorry," he said, tilting his head in a feigned confusion. "I think you have the wrong house." I laughed, thinking he was joking. But his cold eyes and the silence that followed told me it wasn't a joke. He said they were having a private gathering and I wasn't invited. I took a step back, stunned. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, a cruel prank. But the way he stood there, so firm and indifferent, made me realize the truth. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "Rachel," he said, "don't be upset, but you know we couldn't let you in. Things are already tense, and you being there would have made it worse." I said understood, but then he continued, "She still thinks helping with rent means she's automatically included." And I heard someone laugh in the background. I didn't care who it was, it could have been my father or one of my cousins. I had been supporting them for years. I covered the rent, paid the utilities, and even bought Ethan's textbooks. When my father's insurance didn't cover his medication, I paid for it. I never asked for anything in return, never held it over their heads. But that night, I realized I was just the help, not part of the family. That night, I sat in my apartment and made a decision. I logged into all the accounts I shared with them. I canceled the rent auto transfer, blocked the joint grocery card, logged out of all streaming services on their devices, and changed their emergency contacts. I didn't say a word, didn't send a single angry text. Just silence. It wasn't always like this. My mother left when I was 15, and Ethan was 9. She packed her bags and kissed our foreheads, acting like she was just going out for a short errand. My father didn't even try to stop her. He just lit a cigarette and said, she was never cut out for family life. After that, I took on more and more responsibilities. I woke up at 4:30 a.m. to work at a coffee shop before school. After classes, I tutored students. On weekends, I worked at a local bookstore. My father stayed at home, claiming he was too stressed and had back problems. There was no one else to pick up the pieces, so I did. When I graduated high school, college was a distant dream. I had the grades and the drive, but tuition was a luxury I couldn't afford. I had to choose between paying the rent and going to college, so I deferred my admission, and eventually, I stopped thinking about it. Instead, I worked harder. Every month, I put money in the kitchen drawer for rent, electricity, and water. I also paid for Ethan's school supplies and my father's doctor visits. I watched Ethan grow up with the latest gadgets and new clothes, while my father sat on the couch, watching TV and ignoring his responsibilities. No one ever said thank you, but I didn't do it for that. I just wanted to be seen as a part of the family, to matter. When Ethan graduated high school and got into college, they threw a big party for him. Balloons, cake, and speeches. I stood in the corner, clapping, but no one mentioned that I'd paid for his admission deposit and the laptop he unwrapped. They just said, "Look how far he's come." I kept giving, thinking that if I did enough, I'd finally be accepted. But slowly, I started to notice the signs. The group chat that used to be full of messages from Ethan, my father, and our relatives became silent. One night, out of curiosity, I opened the chat and saw they were planning a family barbecue. They'd been talking about it for 2 weeks, and my name was nowhere to be found. I sent a message asking what time I should come, but there was no reply. The next morning, the chat name had changed from Family Redheart to Weekend Crew. A few weeks later, I came home early from work. I was exhausted, my feet ached, and my head was pounding from the long day. As I walked past the kitchen, I heard Ethan on the phone. "She's not really family," he laughed. "More like our live in ATM." I didn't move, didn't cry. I just walked to my room, shut the door, and sat at my desk. That was the moment something inside me broke. I started to keep records of every payment I made, every favor I did. I knew I had to protect myself. Then, one morning, I made a decision. I redirected the rent payment to a new savings account in my name, titled Exit. I froze the grocery card and requested a new digital one that only I could access. I called all the utility companies and transferred or closed the accounts. I found a small studio on the other side of town. The landlord was impressed with my clean record and great credit. He said he wished more tenants were like me. It was a stark contrast to how I was treated at home, where I was seen as a burden. I packed my things at night, piece by piece. I left behind the things they'd given me, not out of spite, but because I didn't want to be reminded of a place where I wasn't truly wanted. The morning I moved out, no one noticed. My father was still asleep, and Ethan had gone to the gym. I didn't leave a note. Just silence. 3 days after I moved out, the storm hit. Ethan called, angry. "Dad's key isn't working. Did you change the locks?" I told him I didn't live there anymore. He thought I was joking, but when he realized I was serious, he said I was ruining Christmas over a tantrum. I told him it was about balance. They called and texted, getting more and more frantic. "We need the rent, you're being selfish," they said. But I didn't answer. I watched as the power bill went unpaid, the rent wasn't received, and Ethan's tuition payment didn't go through. It took 13 days for everything to fall apart. The power went out, the landlord called, and Ethan's college started to send overdue notices. They finally realized what they'd lost. One Monday morning, Ethan called again. This time, his voice was small. "Rachel, please. We need to talk." He stammered about how things were blown out of proportion and that my father was just stressed. He said, "You didn't have to leave. This is your home, too." I reminded him of the time he said I wasn't really family, just a roommate with money. He was silent. I said, "You said I didn't belong, so I made it true." And then I hung up. After that, I started to heal. I began therapy. My therapist, Dr. Lily, never asked me why I didn't leave sooner. She just said it takes time to understand what we deserve. Work got better. I stopped over volunteering and started saying no. 3 months later, my manager offered me a promotion. He said I had the steadiness they needed. I also found real friends. There was a woman named Ava, a fellow art enthusiast from a local gallery. She once said, "You have the strength of someone who's overcome a lot." I started a blog called The Silent Breakaway. I wrote about my experiences growing up in a family that took me for granted. My posts resonated with hundreds of women who shared their own stories. Now, as I sit here on Christmas Eve, I look around my apartment. The little bookshelf I built, the fairy lights in the corner, and the soft, green walls. This is my home, a place where I'm truly myself. I've learned that love isn't real when it costs you your own well-being. And I'm no longer waiting for someone to let me in. I've built my own door, and I'll always keep it open for the right people.